Going vegan. At some point in our lives, we all made that choice to go vegan. Unless, unbeknownst to me, one of you grew up vegan. You know, some people grew up that way. But so I wanted us to share our personal stories about why we went vegan, at what point in our lives that was. And also, I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. You know, people may think, what does a vegan look like? What do they act like? What do they eat? And some people have a negative connotation to even the word veganism. And if one of you out there, if that relates to you, I just beg that you watch this whole interview, and hopefully we will inform you, and hopefully by the end of it, it'll change your mind. So, okay, so at what point, Nathan, because I know at 25, first of all, at 25 years old, Nathan is the youngest person to be inducted into the Animal Rights Hall of Fame. That's amazing. So I feel like that you've been at this for a long time, but at what point did you decide to make those choices to become vegan?
So I was born on a small farm in Ohio, so quite the opposite of being raised vegan. Come from 4 generations of crop farmers. Both of my uncles were hunters, trappers, fishermen. So I grew up in an environment where it was the norm to use animals for humans. When I was 11 years old, though, I learned about factory farming, and I decided that I didn't want to pay someone to abuse animals on my behalf. And like most people, I grew up with dogs and cats, who I considered to be members of our family. And I would see my uncles hunting, trapping, skinning animals alive, scaling fish alive, ripping animals' heads off if they were still alive. And it always felt wrong to me as a young child. But no one in my community validated that all animals deserve our respect and consideration, not just our dogs and cats. So when I learned about factory farming, I went vegetarian. This was at 11 years old. And then when I was 15, there was an animal abuse case at our local high school. So there was a Future Farmers of America class, and the teacher of that class was a pig farmer. So it came to the point in the curriculum where they were to do a dissection project. And the teacher decided that he was going to kill baby piglets on his farm to bring to the school for this dissection project. Now, this morning he arrived, but one of the piglets was still alive.
Oh my God.
And was standing on top of the other piglets in this bucket. A student in the class took this piglet by her hind legs and slammed her head first into the ground. This piglet still didn't die. She had a fractured skull, she was bleeding out of the mouth in horrible distress. Other students grabbed this dying piglet, left the classroom, went to another teacher who was known as the vegetarian who cared about animals. She went to the local vet and had this piglet euthanized, and then she went to the sheriff and filed an animal cruelty complaint, and animal cruelty charges were filed. It went to court, and the very first day of that trial, those cruelty charges were dismissed, because it's considered standard agricultural practice to slam baby piglets head first into the ground.
Wow.
It's called thumping. It's an inexpensive way of killing piglets, but as this case illustrated, it can cause prolonged, horrible, horrible suffering. And clearly, if this had been a puppy that was slammed head first into the ground, cruelty prosecution, psychiatric evaluation, a ban of ever working with animals again would have happened. So
possibly losing his job as a teacher.
Absolutely. Yep. So this was 17 years ago, and it was that case that compelled me to start Mercy for Animals in this small farming community.
Wow. Incredible. Wow, yeah. That's a really tough story to listen to, but it impacts you. Moby, at what age did you decide to become vegan, or was it vegetarian at first?
Well, I've been a vegan now for 29 years. And like most people, I grew up in that sort of strange paradox of loving animals and eating animals. You know, I grew up in suburban Connecticut, and we had lots of rescue dogs and cats and iguanas, and I loved them unconditionally. But I also loved Burger King and McDonald's, and I never really thought about it. And then I had this, what I think of my Saul on the road to Damascus epiphany. I was petting a rescue cat of mine named Tucker. And Tucker was the sweetest cat you've ever met, with this incredibly rich emotional life. And all of a sudden I realized, Tucker, the love of my life, this cat has 2 eyes and a central nervous system and a profoundly rich emotional life and a desire to avoid pain and suffering. And a little switch got thrown in my head, and I realized, every creature with 2 eyes and a central nervous system has a rich emotional life and a desire to avoid pain and suffering. And that was in 1984. 85.
Wow.
So I became a vegetarian then, and then soon after became a vegan. So the core of my veganism is a love for animals and a simple belief that animals are not property. You know, like every animal has its own life, its own rights, its own will. But then as time has passed, my veganism and my activism has been informed by climate change. I mean, up to 50% of climate change comes from animal agriculture. Famine, 100% of famine comes from animal agriculture. And if you're interested as to why that's the case, I'm happy to explain more. Rainforest deforestation, 75%. Antibiotic resistance, 75%. So like, as progressives, we look at our progressive basket of issues and we realize animal agriculture informs and touches almost all of them. So yeah, so at the core of it, it's a love of animals, but it's also very much in service of all my other like progressive ideas.
Exactly. And I think it kind of fell in line with me too. For me, it was about 13 years ago I went vegetarian, and for me, it was at the end of high school, beginning college, and I was actually inspired by a lot of the musicians I looked up to. You were one of them, as well as Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat. He was vegetarian. Davey Havok was one of them, Joan Jett. And so for me, that's why I think it's so important that that we have these activists that have a big platform, because they do influence people. So I would go to different music festivals, and PETA too would be there, and they'd be passing out pamphlets. And I was unaware because I loved animals, but I also ate meat. I loved meat. So I wasn't aware of like the harsh realities that were happening within factory farming. And I would read these sobering statistics and I was like, whoa, which led me to watch some of the footage. And later we're gonna actually watch some footage. But it's so important to have that, because some of us are completely clueless of the suffering and not only how it impacts, how factory farming impacts the animals, but as you said, Moby, the environment. So like the single best thing that you can do to help the environment and help animals and your health is to adopt a plant-based diet. And I was able to learn all that, thank God, 13 years ago. And then it took me about a year to become vegan. It took me a year to start to decide, okay, how do I eliminate dairy, and and then where do you guys draw the line? So for me, then I was like, oh, I started to look at my household products. Okay, that's tested on animals, or there's an animal byproduct there, and I had to clean house there. Same with like cosmetics. And for you at home, there's a fantastic website called leapingbunny.org, and it will show you all the different products out there that are cruelty-free, and they're great products that you probably already use, products that are available at CVS or Sephora or Rite Aid. So, but at what point did you guys have to like draw the line, and at what point do you decide, because like baseball mitts, they're made out of leather, footballs. So where do you draw that line?
I think it's important to understand that veganism is a tool to prevent animal cruelty. For me, it's not about purity. And for people that are thinking about going vegan, they should lean into it. They should be patient with themselves. They should start crowding out the meat, dairy, and eggs with plant-based alternatives. If everyone went meatless just on Monday, for example, over 1 billion animals would be spared the horrors of factory farming in the United States every year.
Wow.
So
just once a year. That's a really powerful statistic.
1 billion animals a year if people just went meatless on Monday.
Meatless Mondays.
Yeah, so I think some people hear about veganism and they say, I could never do this.
Right.
Well, start on Monday, then add Tuesday, ease into it. And what I have seen is that most people, they feel better, not only physically, but they also feel better knowing that they're not supporting horrible animal abuse, the degradation of the environment. Ease into it. People can go to chooseveg.com. We have a website where they can get a vegetarian starter guide.
Fantastic.
There are so many resources out there.
And also, as far as where we draw the line, as we all know, especially in the world of progressive politics and progressive movements, we're sometimes guilty of being in like a holier than thou circular firing squad. Where suddenly like you're criticizing people with whom you agree.
Right.
We saw it with like Bernie and Hillary. Like Bernie supporters saying, but Hillary voted for the war. I was like, have you looked at the opposition?
Right.
Have you looked at the Republicans? We don't have the luxury of infighting. Infighting to me is just like a product of like a diminished worldview and ignorance. And the same thing with the world of veganism. Like, if I see a vegan who happens to be wearing leather shoes, in the grand scheme of things, it's not great, but compare that to like CAFOs and factory farms and animal abuse and the subsidies that go to animal agriculture, like, we have a job and it's not criticizing each other.
I agree. And what about some of like the social impact? Meaning, when you guys first decided to become vegan, or even now, do you find that certain people will judge you? Have your friends and family been supportive? Your fans been supportive?
Well, I mean, like, 'cause I've been a vegan now for 29 years. So when I first became vegan, no one even knew how to pronounce vegan. They're like, is it vegan? Is it vegan? And it was pretty obscure, and it's been incredibly heartening to see the growth of the vegan movement. You know, I mean, Bill Clinton is primarily vegan. Al Gore is primarily vegan. Oprah's primarily vegan. Like 29 years ago, me and the Phoenixes, as far as I know, like, and Gene Bauer from Farm Sanctuary, like, they're just, veganism really wasn't a thing. So it's been really encouraging to see the growth. In fact, later today, I'm having dinner with Cory Booker, our vegan senator from New Jersey. And there's the famous Martin Luther King Jr. quote of, you know, the moral arc of the universe is long and it bends towards justice. You quoted that at the Mercy for Animals Gala. And I think it bends towards justice, but it also bends towards progress and reason. You know, like, if you look at human history from the Magna Carta on, like, there's this steady extension of rights to more and more people and more creatures. And I just see that rationally continuing. You know, we're like, in the future, people will look back and say, like, what? Like, you tortured and killed animals, which tortured and killed the animals, but also compromised the environment and decimated human health. Like, simply to saying, like, what the fuck were you doing?
Right,
like,
such a disconnect, such a disconnect. We have to move on, but quickly, what are some of the links that we can give? So we have the one that you mentioned.
ChooseVeg.com.
ChooseVeg.com, mercyforanimals.org has a lot of great resources. Moby, any advice that you could give to viewers at home who are considering adopting even just a little bit of a plant-based diet?
I guess it's the famous Voltaire quote that Obama paraphrased in his first inaugural address, which is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Absolutely.
You know, like, say, doing 10 good things is great, you know, and you have to start somewhere.
Yes, we're going to leave it on that note.